All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a story that's all about risk, responsibility, and what happens when you decide to just play it safe. We're talking about the parable of the talents, from the Gospel of Matthew, specifically verses 14 to 30. And trust me, it has a ton to say about the gifts we've all been given. Okay, let's get right into it, starting with verse 14. The story kicks off with a pretty high-stakes situation, right? You've got this wealthy man who's about to go on a long journey, but before he leaves, he calls in his servants and, get this, he hands over his entire estate. We're not talking about a simple to-do list here. He is literally entrusting them with everything he owns. The sheer weight of that responsibility, it's just massive. So yeah, this first part of the story, the commission, you could call it, is just so important. It's basically setting the stage for everything that's about to happen. It lays out the characters, what's really at stake, and it gives us all the key symbols we need to unpack to really understand what's going on here. Okay, so to get what this parable is all about, we've got to decode the symbols right from the get-go. And as you can see, this is way more than just a story about a guy and his money. The man, that's meant to be Christ. The far country he's off to, that symbolizes heaven. His servants represent his followers, his disciples, and the goods he hands over, well, that's not actual cash. It's all the spiritual gifts, the opportunities, and the responsibilities that are given to every single believer. And what's really interesting is how smart this master is. He doesn't just hand out the same amount to everyone. Verse 15 is super important here, because it says he gives to each servant according to his several ability. What does that tell you? It tells you he knows his team inside and out. He knows their strengths, he knows their weaknesses, and he customizes the job for each one of them. So this isn't about him playing favorites at all. It's about pure wisdom and really setting them up to succeed. Okay, we have to talk about this word, talent. Because when we hear it today, we immediately think of like a skill, right? Singing, painting, whatever. But back then, in the original Greek, a talenton was something completely different. It wasn't a little coin you just have in your pocket. No way. It was a huge unit of weight, usually for gold or silver. We're talking about a mind-boggling amount of money. Just to put this into perspective for you, a single talent was worth something like 6,000 denarii. Now, a denarius was what a regular laborer would make in a single day, so do the math. One talent was equal to about 20 years of wages. 20 years! This was not some small test. This was an absolutely staggering amount of trust and value that he was placing in their hands. So the stage is set, right? The master's gone, and his servants are left holding these incredible fortunes. And that brings us to the real heart of the story. What do they actually do with it all? Because this is where we see a huge split between the guys who take action and the one who just doesn't. All right, so in verses 16 and 17, we see action, and we see it fast. The first two servants, the 5-talent guy and the 2-talent guy, they don't mess around. They immediately get to work, trading, investing, and bam, they both get a 100% return. They literally double the master's money. Symbolically, what is this? It's pure spiritual productivity. They're taking their gifts and actively using them to grow their master's kingdom. And then, bam, we hit verse 18. And the contrast couldn't be more stark. The third servant, he goes down a completely different road, the road of inaction. And it's really important to get this. He doesn't waste the money. He doesn't gamble it away. He does what he probably thinks is the safest thing he could possibly do. He digs a hole and buries it. That act of burying the talent, it's so symbolic, isn't it? It's really about hiding your potential, letting fear just completely paralyze you. It's about dodging the responsibility that comes with the gifts you've been given. His huge critical failure wasn't losing the money. It was doing absolutely nothing with it. So verse 19 tells us that after a long time, the master finally comes back. Now, that long time is often seen as the whole period between Christ's ascension and his second coming. And when he shows up, well, it's time for a reckoning. It's time to see how they all did. First up to the plate is the servant who got the 5 talents. And you can just picture him, right? He steps up, full of confidence, and he lays out his report. And what a moment of triumph it is. He didn't just keep the master's investment safe, he doubled it. And what does he get for it? Well, he gets the ultimate praise you could ever hope for. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. He's promised even bigger responsibilities down the road, and this is the most important part. He's invited to enter into the joy of thy Lord. That's a huge deal. It symbolizes true fellowship with Christ and eternal life. Okay, pay attention because this next part is maybe one of the most important lessons in the whole parable. The second servant steps up. He turned his 2 talents into 4. Now, look, in raw numbers, that's obviously less profit than the first guy made. But check out his reward. He gets the exact same praise from the master. What does this tell us? It tells us the master isn't grading on a curve. He's not looking at the final number. He's looking at their faithfulness, at the effort they put in with what they were given.
And then it's the third servant's turn, and his excuse, which we see in verses 24 and 25, just tells you everything you need to know. He says, "Lord, I knew you were a hard man." Wow. He has this totally warped view of who his master is. And that flawed perception is the root of his whole problem. It didn't make him want to work harder. It just completely paralyzed him with fear.
The master's comeback here is just devastating. He completely flips the servant's own logic right back at him. He's basically saying, "Oh, so you thought I was a hard man, did you? Well, if you really believed that, then the absolute least you could have done was stick my money in the bank to earn some interest. I mean, that would have taken almost zero effort, but at least it would have shown some kind of stewardship. Anything would have been better than nothing." And that brings us to the end of the parable. And the conclusion, well, it delivers a really stark judgment, and it lays out this universal principle about how spiritual growth and spiritual loss actually works. So what the master does next in verse 29, it might seem a little harsh at first. He takes the 1 talent from the scared servant and gives it to the guy who now has 10. But this isn't about being mean. It's about illustrating a really powerful principle. It's what you could call the law of spiritual increase. Basically, if you use what you've been given, you'll get more. But if you neglect it, you risk losing even what you have. It's the ultimate use it or lose it scenario, but for your soul. And the final verdict in verse 30 is, wow, it's pretty sobering. The unprofitable servant is thrown into outer darkness. This is a really powerful metaphor for being completely separated from the master's presence. And that phrase, weeping and gnashing of teeth, that's all about deep, intense regret. But in the end, his fate isn't some random punishment. Think about it. By choosing not to be part of his master's business, he essentially chose to exclude himself from his master's victory party. And that's what brings this whole parable crashing right into our lives, right now. This isn't just some old story about money. It's a direct challenge. It forces every single one of us to look in the mirror and ask, what are my talents? What gifts, what skills, what opportunities have I been given? And then the big follow-up question, what am I doing with them? Are they out there invested in growing? Or are they buried somewhere in the ground because I'm too afraid to take a risk?